offshore banking started in the Channel Islands, really in the 1960s. Um, there was a guy called George Bolton who was the international director of the Bank of England, and he was wondering, what should they do to help the Channel Islands? And there started to be a bit of banking here, but the real impetus to it was Harold Wilson. Harold Wilson devalued the pound. You may have heard from your mother and father that he devalued the pound in. There were fixed rates of exchange in those days, and he devalued the pound in, was it 1967? But the most important things were that sterling, which in those days could be held in what I loosely call the old colonies, Australia, South Africa, and so on, could no longer be held there, but only in the overseas territories and the crown dependencies. So banks and people moved their deposits to their. They didn't want to put them back in the UK because they'd have been taxed on them on a remittance basis. So, and the commercial banks, the clearing banks in the Channel Islands, and then people like, I think Rothschild set up a subsidiary, Kleinwort Benz and others set up a subsidiary in the early 70s, and then there was a burgeoning of capital markets. So we got Harold Wilson to thank for.
That's incredible. And so I guess, and you were quite young at the time when all this was kicking off. What did you think when it was just good opportunities?
Well, yes. I mean, it was good opportunities. The most countries still had capital controls and so on, but the big business apart from the domestic stock exchange business, the big business was the Eurobond business. Because of legislation in the States, a lot of dollars were held offshore for tax reasons. And also the Russians used to hold lots of dollars, but they wouldn't hold them in the States just in case they may get impounded. So there are lots of dollars sloshing around in Europe. And some of the banks came up with the idea of issuing bonds denominated in
You're going to have to help me out here, Robert. What is a bond?
A bond is a fixed rate obligation for a period of time. It's like a debt issue, and a lot of
like a loan.
It's a loan, yes, exactly.
Long-term loan.
Well, it can. Eurobonds would be from 5 to up to 25 years. I won't go into the technicality.
Yeah, go and listen to a finance podcast if you want to hear about that.
Yeah.
And so this was, I mean, the Channel Islands obviously then became known as a tax haven, haven.
Absolutely. And there wasn't that much regulation around until 1987. The first Financial Services Act in the UK. Prior to that, it was the stock exchange or the Bank of England was responsible for oversight and so on. And it was a bit like a club in the sense that if people offended the rules of the club, it was difficult to do business or respectable business. But and that was all right when it was a smaller population, if you like.
But of course, the world is now coming to the UK and coming to the Crown dependencies.
So they introduced the Financial Services Act in 1987, and I remember going to a conference where the minister was talking about what was going to happen and so on, and I went along, and it was crowded. I said. Compliance must be a growth area. Little did I realize how true my words were at the time.
Wow.
But compliance. So I come in, and I chaired some group putting it into rule book for cash and security segregation, and it was about 8 or 10 pages. And I had reason to look at this about 10 to 12 years later, and it had grown to 88 pages.
Oh my gosh!
But it
and beyond.
But it had the stamp of the lawyers all over it.
Right. Okay. So is it fair to say then, so like the UK's unfair advantage in the world, apart from colonising half the world, was genuinely that it was very quick to jump on finance?
Yes. Pretty innovative so far as finance.